Grammar is the set of rules that I unconsciously have for speaking my native language. Grammar can also be used to refer to the rules that putatively every child, regardless of native language, has in his or her head. Grammar can be used to refer to some specific set of explicit rules, usually set down prescriptively. So, on the one hand, nobody needs grammar instruction in the native language because every developmentally able child can just pick this up magically, and that's what the study of linguistics is all about, and that's fantastic. On the other hand, connected to what people call grammar are questions of style and effect and tone. And I think if you don't have a sense of how to construct phrases and sentences and paragraphs and speeches for specific audiences, then you're not going to be a very good rhetorician. You're not going to be able to get your point across very well, and that's a great pity. And the best way to learn how to be a good speaker and how to be a good writer is actually to pay close attention to what it is that you're saying and what it is that you write. And the best way to do that, surely, is to pay some attention to the things to which you have natural access by virtue of the wonders of language. But people don't pay attention to the things that come naturally. You have to learn about them. So you say you've become a better writer, you've become a better speaker by virtue of having read good books and having learned about grammar. And I agree that those two things are very, very important. But there are lots of different styles, including what one might weakly call grammatical styles in books. You know that there are plenty of people writing in the year 2012 who are writing English, but they're writing very different sorts of English, and many of them are considered really good writers, even though they're very different from one another. And you also know, of course, that if you read something written in 2012, it reads very, very differently from something written in 1912 or 1812 or 1712, even if those are all in English too. So one of the things that I think is very interesting about studying grammar is looking at things that are acknowledged, widely acknowledged, universally acknowledged, sometimes acknowledged as good or great literature, and trying to figure out what stylistically, maybe one might say grammatically, makes them so. But Hemingway is completely different from, say, Dickens, who is completely different from, say, Toni Morrison. We know this. People know this, but they don't know what it actually means. I would advocate paying more attention not just to the big themes in the books and stories that people read and poems, but to the little details that separate this writer, from this other writer. I have no problem with the correctness or the viability or the inherent goodness of the way any native speaker speaks English. But I'm incredibly interested in seeing how my English is different from your English, is different from the English of, you know, that guy over there. That to me is really interesting, being able to figure out what actually makes your language different from mine, and why your language is probably better than mine in certain settings, but mine is probably better than yours in certain other settings. That again gets to the question of style or tone. You should be able to modulate between the way you speak to your students, the way you speak to your wife, the way you speak to your kids, the way you speak to your boss. You should be able to do that. And you should also be able to figure out how speaking to your wife now is different from speaking to your wife in Dickens. I think it's absolutely fascinating that my students behave, roughly speaking, like me in class, but when they talk amongst themselves, because they're 20 plus years younger than I am, they speak in a way, or many of them speak in a way that is understandable to me, but really quite alien. And I think that's fascinating. I would not think that was so great if they actually then did that in class. And that's why, again, I come back to the question of context and the question of knowing different styles, different tones, different authors, different settings. If my students are going to succeed, they have to be able to do something other than speak that way amongst themselves. That's not a linguistic fact, it's a cultural fact. So I have no objection to the way they speak, but I would object if they tried to speak in certain ways, in certain contexts in which it is considered culturally inappropriate. And one of the things that I think people don't really understand is that there has to be some kind of balance between respect for natural speech and recognition that certain types of natural speech just aren't going to fly in certain contexts. And these contexts are often contexts that are very important because they are the difference between making a six-figure salary and making no salary, or between getting that promotion and not getting that promotion, or for that matter, getting that job and not getting that job.